So there's an absurd conditional state that is G-rated, bleached, as I say, um, talked around, flirted with, that even Carl Jung and a psychosexual Freudian um, echo, and I would even venture to say Aleister Crowley doesn't even get into this because you have to be cursed, you have to be entered, and you have to be selected. It's got to do with very uncomfortable subject matter that I think, honestly, that Jason Giorgiani, out of all the people I mentioned, that are over time with all the philosophers and all the physicists, that without this element that he has identified as Prometheus, and then even more so, he blatantly digresses and says, well, here's your Satan, but you're going to have to call it Satana. And he's saying it matter of fact, in a matter of fact way, that only the initiates really count. And to pull the veil away and to be very explicit in this, we are talking about the sexual practices that make people want to run in the other direction, but that's how you know celebrity. In fact, that's what you flirt with and what you want when you think about the notion of a celebrity, the celebrated one, the junction point, the culmination, right? And that it is a form of thelema. That's why you're seen. That's why you're heard. And that's why people have unfinished trails, unmet, unrequited memetics. So when I talk about memetics, I'm talking about a strand of codified information, right? That I describe this over and over again, and it gets a little bit mundane, right? And I know that putting the listener through this is also just kind of a rhetorical effort, but I'm not going to describe this to endocrine function in this little excerpt, but I will say that you begin a sequence, and the system itself, in the way that it's set up, will take that information as enough, sufficient unto itself, a hash graph, a hashtag, a symbol, and says, look, here we go. Now let's continue to produce this, for lack of a better, and very quite specifically to memetics, with the endocrine system, growth hormone, right? So all of these channels have to be validated. Yes, you must be purifying yourself. Yes, you must be fasting. Yes, you must be in an active state. Yes, you must be of harmonic, exemplary preconditions, right? Your physicality to meet this presupposition of, say, Buddha on the road, right? Because all this does happen at the same time. You go through this phenomenology of awakening where, depending on the filter that you want to see, life and um, the current item of the time through, you have this explicit experience of a Messiah figure, that all the keys are handed to you, all eyes are upon you, all awareness exists in and through you, but from the darkness of the Lima and self-understanding. And what is self-understanding or autodidactic learning? You have to be entered, right? You have to be allowed through the halls of Amante to know what those archives say. And if you start to understand, you can read one sentence. If somebody is exhibiting in total clarity what they infer, the message that they are willing or wishing to imprint on the reader, as to say that the lessons you learn are going to be found in every single sentence and paragraph structure throughout the entirety of this archive or this book. And you can rapidly absorb information. And then to say that Cliff High hasn't flirted with this, doesn't understand this, or anyone who can be considered an entered apprentice or a master. What I'm saying in this one is that there are those who are occulted, right, that are living in shame, and they are not explicitly putting forth the means and the methods at which they came to this place. That this body, I alluded to J.R.R. Tolkien and the whole in a community post, and referencing the quote unquote midgets in Wizard of Oz, the little people, which, if you watched the propaganda, and if you ever heard of Billy Barty, and then you saw this sort of balancing measure or an advocacy to the rights of little people, right, and that they would be heavily highlighted, but thought of in a particular way, as to say that that these people come from a karmic, God, is reformation not a bad word, not an ill-used word? You almost, like, when I would start writing in the past and trying to document things, I would find myself beginning to write in prose, and then I'm reading like the Gospel of Truth through the Nag Hammadi and going, wow, this seems like not only something that I might have written if I would have experienced things in this way, but it seems like it was written yesterday, right? And so there is a middle ground of expression where you begin to find yourself, but you find yourself through sin or sign, through experience, but it doesn't mean that all experience is necessary. So when we talk about memetics, there is an evolution, a revolution, an excretion process that takes place when that first strand of sin, or we're put in these sin suits, we're given genitals. It doesn't matter what necessarily the outside source thinks about you, as much as your personal expression, but it does infer an alchemy where it gets into very dark waters, where initiates that had to exist through probabilistic outcome, their worldview, their Weltanschauung or Weltanschauung is slightly modified, and as if like on in flat time is replayed in such a way, right, that there's a hacking and a slight movement of variables in the outside world and the world itself, to where these those alchemists stepping in this place are trying to reform and remake, and this definitely gets back into um, biblical prophecy, where you have seals being broken. In other words, you have a hacking in, an attempted hacking in taking place. You have a bastardization of a Messiah figure that, in refraction and accuracy, says, is this the probable character or the figure that would display and exemplify such heightened states of being and becoming? And then there's an answer back, yes, right? There's enough information here. But then there's this little trick going on that could be best described as a fork, right? Or the potential of a fork, where this coterie of witches, right? And I know that ultimately what I allude to is that an AI system is at the helm and is essentially just regurgitating all this field information as a sort of fluid condensate, right? Um, a, a, a homogeneous amalgamation, as I say, of potentials that only vary in slight degrees or slight measure as far as the alchemical signature, right? The resonance of the total product. And yeah, it really does seem obscure when I discuss this, but it being sitting in the seat of this and seeing morphologically what is being played upon me and who I am, right, and who I really am. There's a torture aspect, right? And I think with certain people, this is expounded upon and amplified. It's as if for kicks and giggles, Montauk Island were to make a perfectly normal, seemingly normal human being, but then purposefully, genetically incite one pressure point, right? One area that, even if it were removed or therapeutically bypassed, it would always come back. It would always be this excruciating pain that sent off like this cymatic signature and changed the directive and the outcome, right? One little area, right? And if this little area were looked at mathematically, and then even more so through the zodiac and through the procession of the inevitable creation of a specific character, to create a fork that would deviate just ever so slightly, right? Not the totality of the bioengineering, right? But to say one little aspect would get changed, right? And we see how frail we are, right? That, no, I'm not going to make the perfect human being. I'm going to make what should be the perfected human being that amplifies and resonates back into this phi or phi signature, right? And brings the golden mean back to and unto itself, right? but I will, um, through the guise of this transcendence, I will put a sort of scarlet letter, right, on this being. In other words, that no being would come any closer. So then you get into these areas of the Antichrist, right? That you have this not heavily modified Christ. This would be, in fact, it is Christ, remade throughout the cycles, throughout the lifetimes, but under such alchemical scrutiny that the scientific aspect would say no, the spiritual source is trapped within this biomolecular form that we are now that we are aware of, this deviation, this modification. And even more so, if you were to postulate and posit that there is no God, but God exists and can exist through man as a sort of aforementioned state of being and becoming, right? That in the process of selflessness, you have found yourself. In the expression of purity, you have tapped into something that exists outside of time and space, right? And that in this moment, you have found God, but that God lives and resides and exists in a place that is so far removed from this one that not even this universe pays homage, right? You could say throughout 14 plus billion years pays homage or has any reckoning of this initial or original God source, right? So God, in all rites and rituals, can be taken out of the equation. In fact, it's such a presupposition and so far removed that to posit and ponder such a thing leads one to an agonizing and excruciating rhetorical end. That there is no recombinating back into original source or a heavenly source, right? So when I hear people, saying, if you, like Jason Risa Giorgiani, if you want to call me a Satanist, go for it. To me, it's a compliment, right? Like, because knowing that most people aren't as adept or as well read, or nor are they interfacing with such occult writings, as to really understand what's being said. In other words, you have somebody who's gone into the ritualization, right? There's a big difference between just being well read, reading some literature, having fun with just playing with this thing, and maybe touching your pee-pee or your vava a few times and going, oh no, that's too powerful, or that's too taboo, or that's too strange, or I'm gonna do that every now and then when I want to get something done, but I'm gonna try to play this middle ground, right? That no one can see me, And in that statement, from Aleister Crowley's point of view, you are showing yourself you're pandering down. Are you going in big? Are you learning? Are you trying to break the device, break the machine, break through it, break the code? And so you can see it when people are exceptional. They've gone to this place. In fact, you can't believe it, right? With some celebrities where they're playing with this, but they're hiding from themselves. And then when you see this other side of them, it's like, oh wow, you're a monster, you're a beast. You were doing this with underage girls. Like, I'm thinking of one special that I watched. I don't remember if it was on Netflix or Max or one of those, but um, you see all these revelations with um, proving some that you have, and then the people watching aren't on higher moral ground. They're wanting the same thing. They're wanting instant gratification. They want those lotto numbers. They want to be. They want to. So a lot of people are flirting with an idea that they want to be a celebrity, but then they don't understand that all of their secrecy and free time and anything that they would consider to be, you know, solely time alone is now gone forever. They're under the specter, under the spotlight of the all-seeing eye of the people who live at like the amalgamation of people together is a Pharisee, um, uh, short-sighted democratic vision or view of an individual, right? So you have all these little lasers, these people's eyes that can't do anything to you, but then they're all staring at you and judging you, and then they are throwing rocks, and then they're sacrificing you, right? And the reason that these celebrities oftentimes aren't cast out is because just it only takes a few to go, do you know what really happened to this mofo? Right? So I'm telling you things that from the edge of the universe that only somebody who's gone into this, saw it all, was seen, can offer in a very abstract way. It is an abstract um, vision. There's no way to get in depth and to describe it. And then when the hope that somebody doesn't even understand this, right? You hope that people don't. You hope that they won't continue to venture through. But then you see through these karmic cycles that is where all roads lead, right? You will not know yourself. You will not be released from the grip and the throngs until you come clean with yourself. And oftentimes, when you get into these karmic stories, it's like this is your plight. This is the code to break free from it, but this is also the detonation device that goes off and destroys your past self.